Please listen carefully.
Welcome to the Big Ideas for Better Places podcast from CityWorks Expo. My name is Brad Stevens, and I'll be your host today. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our guest, Ebrahim Varachia, president and co-founder of Why don't you pronounce this for me as well, Ebrahim? I probably should have asked. Patronicity. Okay, there we go. Well, welcome and thank you for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Well, you came last year to Expo, and I think were really well received, and so I'm really happy to have you back. And so kind of what have you been up to in the past year or so?
It's been so inspiring after last year's Expo, hearing people's conversations and ideas from across the country and what they're working on to build communities. And here back at I'm based out of Detroit, Michigan, where Patronicity was founded. We've been really just growing to see what can we do to take other people's inspirations and help them be champions of their own sustainable community development through crowdfunding. And what we've kind of coined and created as crowdgranting. More on that later.
But you guys have grown substantially in the last year. I think when you came to see us, were you maybe just in Michigan, and you're now in a couple other states as well?
Yeah, so we started out in Michigan, and what's unique about our crowdfunding platform is we partnered with the state of Michigan, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, to provide matching grants for community-driven and place-making projects. Now we do the same type of work in Massachusetts and in Indiana.
That's really impressive, and I have to ask, how has kind of growing and seeing this blow up in front of your eyes, how has that kind of translated for you?
Oh, it's been really humbling and inspiring. Just to see hey, this is an idea we have. What if we could take the impact Kickstarter has had within the arts community, and what if we can transform it towards community development? And what if we can find larger sponsoring granting partners to match, citizens and residents, little dollars that they're chipping in to build community projects. And there was a little idea that we had, and now to see it being adopted, and be widely successful in Michigan and now in Massachusetts and in Indiana, different states that are have vastly different populations and types of people. It's really cool to see, a little baby kind of grow.
Well, now kind of, where did you guys start from? What was kind of the first endeavor with this?
So back in April of 2013, I have to think, it's already 2017. Back in 2013, we launched Patronicity. Of course, we were kind of thinking about it, in the months before that. But we launched, and we had this idea of people are doing crowdfunding projects, and they're crowdfunding neighborhood projects. And we, being based out of Detroit, saw that Detroiters are really go-getters. They kind of take it into their own hands to get things done. In a city that's faced so much blight, we have the largest amount of vacant lots in the country, and a city that's faced bankruptcy. There's also lack of access to resources and representation. The Detroiters are really, strong people. And we thought, what if we can, help them become champions of their own sustainable community development? And we also recognize that granting organizations are funding these types of projects. They want to see the community grow. But who's the best person to champion a community project than the people living within those communities themselves, the residents? And so we started. It was kind of chicken and egg in the beginning. We didn't have matching grant sponsors because we didn't have projects, and have projects because we didn't have grant sponsors. But we just kind of put our head down and started this crowdfunding platform. It was very similar to all other types of crowdfunding platforms. So it was difficult to differentiate ourselves between Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other ones out there. But we kind of, found a little niche for us, and that was involved within communities. And then, finding this matching grant opportunity and partnering with the MEDC, we really transformed this model and got it off the ground.
That's part of what's really interesting for me about what you all do is that, those of us that have done this kind of work know how difficult it is to do grant-based work because of the limits that are put on you by that. And I think you guys are really shifting the model on that and freeing up people to do new and exciting things that wouldn't necessarily fit in the old grant cycle and in the old models of how this would be funded. And I think that's one of the things that I find most exciting about what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Actually, a kind of cool story along the lines of getting outside the traditional grant model and process is when you think about grants, you think about long, tedious paperwork. You have to have, a grant writer, and then you have to have someone who knows someone at the grant organization, and this long turnaround process that you're waiting to find out if you get awarded. But this model that we've kind of piloted and created and perfected with the MEDC here and now replicating it in Massachusetts and Indiana, we're started on the idea of let's cut away some of that red tape. Let's see if we can really streamline and, for the most part, democratize access to capital for these community-driven projects. And so what we kind of created was, hey, here's a very transparent way that people can realize and actualize what types of projects are happening in their communities. People are crowdfunding for them. And the crowdfunding is really transparent, kind of showcases the budget. Hey, we need, $10,000 or $20,000 to create this community pocket park. And so we help, projects craft a crowdfunding page. We submit that with a few other details to review to the granting organization, and they give it the thumbs up if it fits within the grant parameters after we do some of the vetting. Once the thumbs up, the beauty of this program is they give the community the opportunity to be the final review committee. And so with that, they can, the community can say like, hey, I love this idea. I want to chip in, $5 or $25. And if they can raise that, those funds, then the state comes in and matches it. And so it's a really quick grant review process and turnaround time. Actually, the review time is 3 days. It's the fastest grant review you'd ever hear of. And then, the community is kind of in charge of, helping them fundraise and crowdfund, and then be able to build it out.
But I think it's so cool too, because this is an old model in some ways, in that you often have these kind of matching grants. It's not necessarily a new thing, but it's and the idea of fundraising locally for a project, that's not necessarily a new thing. But this is kind of systematizing that and bringing powers to play that are bigger than often come to play, and democratizing it, as you mentioned, which I think is part of what makes it so interesting, the transparency and the democracy that you can see in the very evidence of what's happening. It's just really compelling to see. How did you guys, what's kind of your background that brought you and made you think that this was a way that we need to move forward?
So sometimes, backgrounds differ, and you just kind of find yourself in a space that you didn't expect, yourself to be in. My partner, who kind of founded and started this idea, Chris, ran a crowdfunding campaign back in 2010, and he ran a Kickstarter to take a film he was working on to Sundance. And back in 2010, there was no, crowdfunding happening. It was a second crowdfunding project in Detroit. The only other one was the RoboCop statue, which people may know, that never really got built. But we thought, hey, what if we can, take that impact? What if we can do, and empower communities to do it? And my background, I had graduated and I was coming into working in the co-working space, which Chris was working out of, on another startup. But I have always had an interest and an involvement within my local community. Even though I studied international development, I was still really focused on what can I take from, those ideas and apply it to my, my city. And I stayed in Michigan. I moved into Detroit, and we started working on this idea.
Well, I know that can be a winding road. I have master's in forestry, but I don't know anything about trees. And my wife has a master's in international development, and she's now working for a local nonprofit. So who knows where you wind up at the end of it, but I think we often wind up where we need to be to make the most difference with these things. But that's really fascinating. I'm also, my day job is running a co-working space, so I'm happy to hear about the synergy that came out of you guys working together there.
Yeah, we love our space. So if you ever, anyone's in Michigan, holler at me. We'll love to show you around.
Now, you guys have to be a nonprofit to put your stuff on the platform?
Nope. So I think one of the cool things with Patronicity is we work with anybody and everybody. Now, there are projects that are not matched, and so individuals can definitely champion those. But ones that are coming in and to be eligible for the matching grants from our various partners, you have to be a nonprofit or a municipality, so a local city governance or town. But I think that's kind of unique in itself. Nonprofits and municipalities especially municipalities, tend to have a very difficult time figuring out crowdfunding. And it's still really relatively new. But I think we work with them, give them a lot of technical assistance on the ins and outs of crowdfunding, as well as the match being pretty transformative. So, hey, if you raise this money, if you hit your goal, you get double the amount. And so it's a pretty big incentive for numbers and for projects.
Well, it's really interesting too, because the city's so used to just saying we're going to do this project, or having a few public meetings, and out of those meetings they're going to say, well, this is what we decided on, we're going to do this project. And you're turning around and saying, well, actually, why don't you say to the community, instead of we're just going to do this project, we'd like to do this project. Do you guys think this is a good idea? And if so, can you help us fund it? And that's a very different way of an interaction between a municipality and its citizens.
Yeah, and we find a lot more, engagement and community engagement, civic engagement because of that. The projects tend to have even deeper, more well thought community gatherings around what they were trying to create, and input from that community. I hear people sometimes critique it. Well, hey, if people are paying for it, then what's the city going to be paid for? They're obviously also putting in dollars into it, but with strapped budgets and budgets becoming cut all the time, that it's a great opportunity to have other people being involved to help build and create some of these things. And so it's only amplifying and increasing. Plus, it's kind of like voting with your tax dollars on where you want your dollars to actually go.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's essentially a form of participatory budgeting in some ways. That it's a very specific function there. It really is interesting how what can happen when that democracy is given back. I mean, do you have any particular projects that you were kind of surprised that got funded in the end?
Yeah, there's always surprises in projects that get funded. Two maybe stand out. One, we weren't surprised, but it was it's called the Reach Community Art Center, and it's a art center in Rio Town, Lansing. It was where the old Oldsmobile used to be produced, and the factory shut down. And so what happens when factories shut down? Places kind of become blighted, and so here was this art center that was catering to neighborhood youth and to give them another opportunity to not be on the street. Now, this project was like the third project to apply when we started this program back in 2014 with the MEDC. And the MEDC is based out of Lansing, and this project is based out of Lansing. It's actually really funny because the MEDC's headquarters is on Washington, and like 5 miles down this road, outside of like downtown Lansing is Reach Community Art Center. And when they first applied, everyone was like, hey, we've never heard of these people, and they're in our backyard, like they're in Lansing. And in a traditional program, they wouldn't have been approved. But we thought, let the magic of the program happen. Like, it fits exactly the types of projects we want to fund. It's a neighborhood community art center catering to everybody. And we gave them a thumbs up, and they started, and they blew us away. They had donations from all types of people. They raised $49,000, received a $48,000 matching grant to be able to build out the gallery and this backyard garden space and amphitheater, and it was just really inspiring to see that happen, and to see a project that may, in a traditional grant cycle, not have been approved because nobody knows. But the community really stepped on with, was like, we love this thing, we love this space, and we want to see it happen. And here, I want to chip in, $500 to make that, to make my voice heard. And so that was one, I think, that really, came through, that we didn't expect. But there's been other ones where it just went to the line, and, surprise donations and donors came in, and really pushed it to the next level. And we were like, whoa, hey, this one hit its goal, and we didn't think that was happening.
How have you kind of been able to sell this to the funding agencies? You've got some great track record to go back on, but I wonder, these are not the most forward-thinking organizations usually. How have you been able to get them on your side?
That's been a challenge, and it's a continual challenge. It really takes an innovative forward thinker at some of these organizations to see, can I do and how can I transform community development and economic development? The MEDC kind of was, here in Michigan, and I think we got really lucky. A lot of credit goes to them and Catherine and Nate, who led that charge, and saw the vision that we had, and they created their own vision on how placemaking and crowdfunding and crowd granting can kind of come together to create an incredible program. And in Indiana and in Massachusetts, again, it took a few visionary, people at those organizations to step out there and really put themselves out there, step out on the line and say, hey, I really believe in this program and this idea. You have to trust me, it'll work. And it's worked in Michigan. And now, it's worked really well in Massachusetts and in Indiana. And, we're looking to see who are the other, economic development organizations that are interested and willing to try this out. But also, who are the other foundations who are willing to try this out? Who are the other corporations? And corporations always have corporate social responsibility dollars. They're giving back to the communities. And who are they interested in testing out a model where they can garner, community support, get a credible amount of media and press coverage from these projects? Because it's just such a great story. Almost all of our projects receive about 5 times as much press and media coverage. And, a streamlined grant system and approval system. And it saves, them a lot of time and a lot of money. And that's why they love it. Because they can spend more time, supporting communities and working with them, and less time reviewing and evaluating applications. Because it's such a transparent community process.
It's interesting to me how this falls under the purview of the economic development departments for those cities, because I can see that to some degree, but I think that often the community development is definitely different from economic development in some ways, and I think that in many of these places it can be hard to see community development and placemaking as an economic development driver. Has there been a particular narrative that you guys have used to kind of bring that point home?
Yeah. So, even starting with the MEDC way back in 2014, when we were ironing out this program and launched it in June of 14, the MEDC came as an economic development or, corporation, came thinking, what if we flip economic development on its head? And in Michigan, we have a huge problem, as a lot of, states do, of brain drain. We have great schools, but then people, flee to the big cities. And the East and West Coasts. And so they thought, how can we flip, economic development on its head? What if we create communities that people will love to live in, to work in, and to play in? And so if we create community spaces, we incentivize placemaking so that neighborhoods can build, neighborhood parks and renovate alleys to become these green and vibrant alleys. and create community centers and farmers markets. And we've had, a dam that kind of removed its dam and returned the rapids to a place called Eaton Rapids, which had no rapids before this project. What if we can do these types of projects to incentivize people to come to live there, to incentivize other businesses to see the growth? And so it was kind of taking a different look at economic development and putting people first and creating places. And when you do that, it kind of is a long cycle, but it creates better, deeper, more grounded communities that are richer and more vibrant. And that's kind of what we've seen and how we're going about it. Again, it's a very unique model and a different way to look at it. But it takes someone with that kind of insight to say, like, hey, this is a different approach. And it's obviously working in multiple places. Let's see how it'll work, in my community.
We'd like to take a moment now to say thank you to our sponsors today. The Urban Affairs and Planning program at Virginia Tech School of Public and International Affairs offers an interdisciplinary approach to understanding planning and policy for megaregions, cities, suburbs, and rural regions in the U.S. and abroad. UAP faculty have expertise in urban planning, architecture, urban design, economics, geography, political science, law, technology, and engineering, and provide students with a multifaceted understanding of how communities grow and change. Students apply their knowledge and professional skills by participating in real-world problem-solving with community clients through project-based studios and applied research. UAP emphasizes technical analysis and policy evaluation in approaching the complexities of modern communities. So a big thanks today to the Urban Affairs and Planning program down at Virginia Tech for being our sponsor. If you'd like to hear more, check them out online. But without further ado, we'll get back to today's guest. Thank you. Well, that question of how to raise awareness for the importance of this, I think, is a really interesting one. I think it cuts both ways in some ways, so that, one of the projects that I've helped lead here in Roanoke has been an offshoot of the soup events that you guys have kind of started up there in Detroit, which is, a different model of crowdfunding things. And one of our goals down here is really to show people that, hey, if you have an innovative idea, we can kind of bring the community together in a way that will support that, which has not always been the case, I don't think. I think there's a hurdle to get people to get their ideas out there and to share what they think would be cool and innovative and impactful for their communities. So I wonder if you guys have had trouble in some communities in actually getting them to participate or getting them to think outside the box in terms of what ideas they want to put forward.
I think if you give people the opportunity, they'll rush to it. And I think that's the thing that we're failing to see and do, is ask and give people the opportunity to have a way and a mechanism to be involved with their community. People want to be able to support and build their neighborhoods. They want to see their communities and their neighborhoods grow. And just given that opportunity, we've seen it turn out. We've seen communities I've had people working on like city planning, and they come to us with a project and they're like, well, this is a really cool opportunity, but I don't know people in the community that in our city, in our town, that's going to help, fund this. I was like, well, do they want it? He's like, if they talk about this, they want it. I was like, well, here's a way to kind of put their money where their mouth is, right? Like, do they really want it? And if so, you're working to be able to build it. We're working as a community, as a town, as a city, as a nonprofit to be able to create this for them. But we need a little bit of help along the way. And I was like, if you give them those opportunities, will they come out? And let's try it. And we've been surprised over and over and over again from rural towns where we think, hey, people don't have access to internet and they're not going to go online and donate. And, us creating offline donation opportunities with Patronicity. But rural communities really coming out to support it. We've seen blue-collar towns really come out to support it. We've seen, unbanked communities and struggling communities in Detroit and in Flint really come out to support it. And then we see neighboring communities supporting their neighboring communities. And I think that's really been kind of a model to showcase. Like, people want to be involved. They want to have a voice. And if you give them that opportunity, they're going to be there, and they're going to probably surprise you.
Do you think that there's a difference? These people can donate money anytime. Do you think that by doing it in this way, that it feels more like an investment, and so then they feel drawn into it, and more than just, hey, I gave some money to this? Is there some ownership involved with it in the end, do you think?
Yes, definitely, and we've seen that. We've had there's a project in Lansing also. It's called the Beacon Soccer Field. And a specific story to this is there was like strong winds, about 60-mile-per-hour winds one day, and one of the light posts from the soccer field kind of got bent and, almost was going to fall on the field. And one of the people that was driving by, a contributor of this project, had called the project, organizers and the people in charge, and it was like, hey, here's this, I just want to let you guys know. And they're like, oh, we know, we're on it, but thank you for that concern. And we see that kind of sense of ownership where people say like, hey, maybe I gave $5 or $50 to this park. But now that park is just as much my park as it is anybody's park. And I helped build it. I have like a financial stake in it because I care about it. And so they're going to also maintain and make sure it's not trashed, and there's no graffiti, and it's well maintained and well kept up. And then when those organizations, those spaces need volunteers, there's also now a first line of people who already, gave, some support. Maybe they'll be able to give additional support. Maybe they'll be able to lend a hand, or, have their kids lend a hand, or bring their friends out and do something else on a more volunteer basis. And those are kind of some of the things that we've been seeing from this process.
That's so fascinating, and it's so great to hear about these communities that care enough to give back in this way. When you see a community, or when you think of a community that works or that does things well, what kind of comes to your mind? What are the components that go into making a community work well?
I think the love of place, like you having the sense of a dedication and a care to where you live, and those types of inclusive communities that are working to build and create those spaces and places that people feel safe in, that people love to be and are proud of, are the communities that really come together and make things happen. But again, we've been surprised. We started this in Detroit, and now we're across all of Michigan. Projects, in the UP, and the UP is very different than the Lower Peninsula. But it also crosses political lines. So we ran this program in Michigan. We're like, hey, of course it works in Michigan, but will it work in another state? So Michigan is kind of like a purple state, but Massachusetts is as blue as they come, and Indiana's pretty red. But when it comes to building communities, and when it comes to supporting, your neighbors and creating these vibrant spaces, it's been successful over and over again in all of these states. And that's what's really inspiring. I think it's just people that you'll find people that really care in all of these communities. And that's what makes them so powerful and impactful, and places I think that, people want to be in.
This is so interesting to me because I think that absolutely resonates for me, and it just makes me wonder in some ways. There was a long time when cities were struggling a whole lot, and I wonder, is there something you think that's changed in terms of our willingness as a culture and as communities to invest in these things, or is it this isn't working, we finally have to take it back ourselves, or what do you think is kind of going on with that?
I think there's a cultural shift across the entire United States. If we look back in the last decade or so, there's been a resurgence of farmers markets and a support local culture. People wanting to support their neighbors and their friends, and the small businesses. And I think that's really important. And I think that's what people are recognizing, and people are turning to it. And so because of that, and through that resurgence of farmers markets and neighborhood artisan markets, people are willing to not only support local businesses, but also willing to support the creation of local spaces and places. And so I don't know what led to that shift, but I think that sense of community and pride is really coming back to people. And especially, in communities and towns outside of the big cities. In big cities, of course, there's a different level of camaraderie and affiliation. And maybe it's connected to the sports teams, and it's connected to your neighborhood, restaurant and bars, but there's still that sense of patronage. And that's where that idea of like patronicity comes from, that everybody could become a patron of their city. And that's kind of what we're looking to inspire and create as a culture, and then as a brand, and what we're trying to do for this year and the next 10 years.
Well, it is fascinating. There's a local bookstore right up the street, and it's the one of the only local bookstores in the area, and I feel the need to go there, if only to make sure that that place still exists. And I think that that's kind of what you're saying here, is that we have decided and kind of rekindled this knowledge that if we want these things in our communities, we have to be responsible for supporting them and making them happen. That we can't like personally be involved in everything, but this use of money is something that can be powerful in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I guess, so this is 3 years or 4 years now that you've been doing this?
4 years. We started in April of 2013. That summer, I got into a car accident, so I was out of shop, out of commission for a few months. But I'm been back shortly after that, and been heading strong ever since.
So kind of, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned along the way, along these last few years of being engaged in making these communities or in empowering them to improve themselves? I
think I'll echo some of the things I said before on the resiliency of communities. I think that's really surprised me. I thought this could work. And I thought, some people may, want to support it. But the amount of support and the amount of goodwill that people put out there has really, taught me something. And then, just learning things along the way. Learning things from like a business perspective also. How we created our company and how we're growing, and how other small companies are created and growing locally. I think it's really cool.
Well, I'm always interested, as one who runs a co-working space here, where do you kind of think that the entrepreneurial mindset, that's become a buzzword in terms of community change these days in a way that it hasn't always been. But I wonder why you think that's so important as we move into the coming decade here.
I've always felt like, to work for yourself is like one of the greatest things, and to come up with your own ideas. And those are the spaces and places where you're the most passionate about. And when people are the most passionate about the work that they're doing every single day, then they're going to be doing the best work for themselves and for their greater community, and for the people around them. And so I think that it all plays into it. Our co-working space here, it's a triple bottom line business, and a lot of the businesses and organizations here are all triple bottom line. And so thinking about, obviously making a business successful, but what is that social and that environmental impact, and having multiple consciousness of where we live and how we live, and how we interact with our surroundings, I think is really important. But having passionate people leading that charge, and creating and fostering that sense of, common goal on wanting a better place for everyone, I think is really inspiring and powerful for the future.
I really like that. This idea that if you allow passionate people to pursue what they're passionate about, that we all wind up being better out of it. That's such a compelling perspective. I love that. Well, kind of as we come to a close here, I wonder if you could share kind of a story that you think encapsulates what it means to be a community that's working well, or a strong place, or just in your experience, has there been something that's really shown you what that power comes from?
I think I'll go back to a story, crowdfunding related with work, of course. We had a that was creating a community center in North Rosedale Park, Detroit. And so they're crowdfunding, and they're trying to raise, $20,000 to get a matching grant from the MEDC to be able to finish off this like $600,000 project that they've been working on for a few years. And it's the final portion of funding, and there's all this excitement. And we also at Patronicity allow offline donations, because we know there's people who have events, or some people don't have credit cards, or whatever that reason may be. We just want it to be a more inclusive community initiative to crowdfund. And the one day I came in the morning and I saw an offline donation added to this project for $62.50. Very odd number. And I was like, why is that? Maybe it's a typo. And so I reached out to the lady heading the project. I was like, hey, Martha, how's it going? I noticed this. I wonder if you entered it wrong or something. And she said, oh, no, that's correct. $62.50 on the dot. And what happened, where that money came from, is there's been a lot of excitement. We've had a lot of community turnout, surprisingly so, more than we expected. And there's a little girl in our community. She's 8 years old, and she wanted to support this project as well. But this little girl didn't really have much money. So she and her mom helped her, bake some goods and have a bake sale. And so that's the money that she, raised from a little local community bake sale, so she can be able to feel a part of that community and give back and help create this community center that's going to benefit her entire community, benefit herself, benefit her neighbors. But it's a way for her to be involved. And when I heard that, I was like, man, that's what we're here to create. And that's the type of communities we're creating. Where everyone, even like a little 8-year-old girl, can feel involved and participate in a way that she can support the building a vibrant community in her neighborhood. That's kind of a little story that comes to mind.
Wow, that's so powerful. If only all of our communities could empower our young people in that way, what strong places we would be in. Well, thank you so much, Ebrahim, for taking the time today. If you'd like to hear Ebrahim's talk from CityWorks last year, you can check it out on our website, cityworksexpo.com. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Brad, for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Big Ideas for Better Places podcast today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a rating. It really helps other people find out about our fascinating guests and find the information that we have to share. Lastly, please save the date for our upcoming event, October 5th through 7th in Roanoke, Virginia. And keep up to date by following us on Facebook and checking out our website, cityworksexpo.com. That's cityworksexpo.com. Thank you guys again, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.